Sometimes you're going to have a jerk and you have to fire them.
Yeah.
If you have somebody that it's not a misunderstanding, and you can always tell because they dig in. This is the person that digs
Yeah.
in. That when you bring it
Yeah.
up, there's no apology. They're just a jerk. Fire them because they're
Yeah.
never going to get better. And so just fire the jerk. We've always had this weird idea that people need to be good at interviewing, but we're not hiring them to be interviewed. We're hiring
Yeah.
them to do a
Yeah.
job. So we need to be good at interviewing so that it doesn't matter whether or not they are.
Business Growth Talks podcast is created and hosted by Mark Hayward. In this show, we talk about how to grow a business in the growth stage. The growth stage is often marked by rapid developments, increased revenue, and an escalating customer base. In each episode, we talk to entrepreneurs and business owners who have grown businesses, and we cover topics like scaling processes, market expansion, financial management, human resource and talent development, and customer retention. If you are looking for actionable advice, tips, and techniques on how to grow, run and build your business, this is the podcast for you.
Welcome to another episode of Business Growth Talks, where we deep dive into stories and strategies behind successful businesses. Today we have an incredibly inspiring guest, Katherine McCord, the founder and driving force behind Titan Management, a pioneering firm in universal workplace design and people operations. Titan Management is not your normal, typical HR firm. It's a powerhouse that builds fully inclusive, non-linear and sustainable people operations programs that deliver tangible results. Today, Katherine will share with us her journey, the innovative approaches she champions, and the impact her work is having on business across the country. So without further ado, let's welcome Katherine McCord to Business Growth Talks. Hello, Katherine. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you very much for having me today.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. This is an interesting subject, not just about your experience and your business. I recently had a neurodiverse child diagnosed probably about 18 months ago. And it's been an interesting journey, an interesting experience we've had, and I'm still learning and getting to grips with how that comes. So I will be asking you questions about that through the interview. Hopefully that'll be all right, because I know it is part of your story of how you've been able to grow businesses. So hopefully that'll be okay with you.
Oh, heck yeah. No question.
Brilliant.
Let's go for it.
Wonderful. Now, the first question I'm going to ask, I ask all my guests, is what does a business mindset mean to you?
To me, a business mindset is that you need to be focused on what you're giving to your client base, and you also need to have a mindset for growth and innovation. Because if you're not focused on growth and creating a quality product, what are you even doing? So focused on the deliverables and what your actual mission is, and then everything it takes to get there. I'm an extremely mission focused person. And so when I work with my clients, I bring everything back to missions, whether it's the mission of the organization, the mission of a program, the mission of a policy, whatever it is, extremely mission focused. A business mindset is mission, and then integrity, and then growth and innovation.
So that whole idea of mission, so just break that down for me. If someone's looking to find out their mission, whether it's their personal mission, their business, or as you say, a policy, how do you break that down and get that consumable for your clients to know what you mean and how they can achieve that?
And I love that you mentioned personal missions too, because I have personal missions, and literally everything in my life comes back to those missions. And mine are, I call them my 3 I's. They're integrity, inclusion, and innovation. And everything comes back to that. And when I work with my clients, it's really, mission is about the purpose, right? What is the purpose of this? Why are we doing it? What is the ultimate goal? So for instance, to use sports, because I love sports, right? If you love football, or what we call here in the States, soccer, right? And the ultimate mission is to win the game. That's the purpose of playing, is to win. And so how you get there is everything in between, but the mission is winning, right? And then just, you can piece all the little things, and you can be flexible, right? Because the only thing that actually matters is the mission. And as long as that's being achieved, everything else can be bent, be flexible, be flexed, all of these types of things. And you can gain and lose players, that type of thing, but it's all about the win. So
But it's interesting you use the football metaphor, because there are so many different ways that you can win in football.
Yes.
So you can be defensive, you could be more attacking, you could be more compact, or you could be going to the wings. There's lots of ways to be able to achieve it. And I'm assuming that's how you work out for your clients what their mission is, because it's building on their strengths, what team members they have in their team, to be able to define how they're going to achieve that mission. Is that right?
Somewhat. You somewhat got it. So you do want to look at the assets that you currently have to build a plan based on what's currently going on. But as we all know, anybody who's a sports fan is aware that players change, right? And who your opponent is matters, right? You can't play Bayern Munich the same way that you would play Manchester United, which I realize those would, anyway, that's a whole other thing. But you can't play those two teams the same way. And so you have to be able to shift and pivot, right? And that's one of the main things that I teach my clients is it's about the mission, not how you get there. So whatever you need to be successful in your mission at that time, that's what you need to do, which is also how I approach inclusion, right? So everybody functions differently. And inclusion, by the way, is for everybody. It's for literally every single human. There's not a single human that's immune from inclusion. It's an all or nothing concept, as is universal design. It is you either have it or you do not. And inclusion is about supporting people and working in ways that are natural to them and that are healthy for them, because that's the only way that they can climb up Maslow's hierarchy, which is a psychological principle that takes you from your base needs up to the ability to thrive, right? So the hunter-gatherer all the way up to enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it, the ultimate goal and functionality. So helping people move up that pyramid and take care of themselves, because that's how you get innovation, creativity, higher productivity. Hewlett-Packard did a fantastic experiment where they took one team, created universal design, created full inclusion for them, let them work however they needed or wanted to, whatever made them comfortable. And that team became 33% more productive than its counterparts. Wow. And they were healthier, they were happier, there was more creativity, ultimately more customer satisfaction, and then ultimately more profits, right? Which is the mission of a business, ultimately, is to make money, right? Or at least one of the missions. So bringing everything, being flexible is the key. The mission is the whole thing, but you have to be willing to change up your game plan along the way.
And we will touch on some of those points, because I've just put a couple of things that I would like to ask you about that. But I want to ask my next question first, which is, tell me one thing about your upbringing which reflects on who you are today.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hey, business enthusiasts, ready to boost your entrepreneurial journey? Tune in to the Growth Gear podcast with Tim Jordan, presented by Carbon 6. Tim dives into cutting-edge business growth strategies and new brand insights. Whether you're a startup founder or a seasoned exec, gain the tools to elevate your business. Subscribe to the Growth Gear with Tim Jordan on your favorite podcast platform. Shift into high gear. The Growth Gear is your guide to fast-paced business success.
My parents and the way that they raised me with complete autonomy was extraordinary, and it was very much ahead of their time, and it really had an impact. So I was treated as an equal, and not from the standpoint that I was allowed to run wild or anything. I was given structure and guidelines, right? But I was never treated as less than. I was always given value, and I always was allowed to voice my opinion, to share thoughts, to interact in conversation. My needs were taken seriously. My uniqueness was honored. And my parents, they just rolled with that. And for a child who very early on, it became clear was neurodivergent, the first two of my diagnoses to show up were my obsessive compulsive disorder, and which my mother did recognize, being an RN, registered nurse, and then my misophonia, which they knew what was going on, but they didn't know the name for it at the time. And misophonia is where there are certain sounds that make you malfunction. It actually interrupts your neural pathways, And it can create actual discomfort, it can create agitation, and it can create distraction and inability to function at a high level. So those are the first two that showed up, and they just went, okay, that's who you are, no big deal. And they just kept going. And they showed me the strengths behind those things so that I wouldn't be upset or feel deflated by them. And they taught me self-accommodation. So having parents that always were inclusive of me, really and truly, that's what they were, and gave me a lot of autonomy was big. My mother always tells the story of taking me to work with her when I was just under 3 years old. Okay, so it was a little itty bitty thing. And I'm sitting in her waiting room, and there was a professional gentleman waiting to go in and have a meeting with somebody. She worked in HR, and I was talking to him, and apparently he was ignoring me. And I finally tapped him. I said, excuse me, I'm speaking to you. Please speak back. Always having that sense of, hello, I'm a human. You don't get to ignore me was highly impactful. And I expect the same for others. And the fact that when I discovered that other people didn't have, that's when I got to the work that I did.
Yeah. And I went on an online course / webinar thing a couple of weeks ago. My daughter's got autism, and it was talking about emphasizing the positives, the not thinking it as something that is damaging or difficult or whatever. You should be like, I know the superpower is a little bit overused now, but making it into positives. And it was really fascinating talking to a psychologist and a psychiatrist about that, because you should be empowering children in general, not just neurodivergent children,
right,
but just children in generally. And sometimes it can be hard as a parent, because I worry about things for my 8-year-old who has autism, and actually being able to just paint it in a positive outlook and a progressive and understanding way. And some of her behaviors can be strengths, and some of her things that she's not so good at, yes, they can be weaknesses, but they also can be learning lessons for her. It was an absolutely fascinating couple of hours that I spent. What would you say that your diagnosis has meant for you? Do you see it as a superpower? Do you see it as a thing that can really differentiate you in a business world as well?
Oh gosh, yes. I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for my diversities at all. Like, it's not even close. And by the way, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, the National, in the US, the National Institute of Health, the National Library of Medicine, all have studies about the benefits of neurodiversity, which became a specialty of mine because, again, I started seeing that other people hadn't had the benefits that I did. So I got some neuroscience certifications and started speaking and teaching on these topics. And I have 4 neurodiversities. I have 1 medical, which is I have a seizure disorder that interrupts my neuropathways and causes some little funky stuff. The 2 that we discussed earlier, the misophonia and the OCD, and I also have bipolar 1, which means that I have long downs, long ups, and then long periods of just perfectly regulated self.
Yeah.
And it's very cyclical. And I would not trade my bipolar for anything in the world. I absolutely love it. The mania is great because I get, first of all, I work 90 to nothing anyway. And when I'm manic, man, there is no greater output. It is like a human machine. I am just like a human freight train, just working towards the mission. I have great energy. I'm very positive. I get a lot of one type of creative work done. It's really helpful. That's a time when I can really do a lot to give back because I have hyper energy. I have a lot more going on. Even my depressive cycles are good because that's great for another type of creativity. And it's great to get some of those busy, mundane things out of the way, right? Because that's where my energy is at and where my mind is at. The obsessive compulsive disorder, I am hyper organized. I have hyper attention to detail. I will catch things that other people don't. Also because of the way my mind functions, which is linked to both the OCD and the bipolar 1, I have great 3D model thinking. And so I can see things in a big picture, see all the little pieces. I'm great at designing events, things like that, which has proven really helpful. So I absolutely have superpowers. Is there disability? Yes. I would also say, and obviously like the one that causes seizures, that just sucks. Like I always tell people, there is no spin on that. Seizures are not fun. They're just not good. And OCD has its times that it can be really frustrating, really
Mm.
frustrating.
Mm.
Actually, one of the best examples of that was on a show called Scrubs, and Michael J. Fox played a doctor with OCD, and it showed the benefits.
I've seen it. Yes.
You
yes,
did? You saw it? Oh, good. Yeah.
Yes.
So you
yes.
see the Dr. Kevin Casey. I like that name is always stuck
Yeah.
in my head. And you see the benefits, but then you also see how debilitating it can be when you
Yeah.
get stuck,
Yeah.
and you see what compulsion actually means. And
Yeah.
most shows skip over what compulsion
Mm.
actually looks like.
Yeah.
But that show really showed both sides. But I will say too that a lot of times, so there is actual physical disability, but I think the main type of disability that a lot of people face is societal, because
Yes.
society is not designed for them. And so it seems that they have a disability, but really they're functioning just fine. It's just that
Mm.
the world around them is not designed right. It's like going back to the football analogy. If you took, oh gosh, who's a great football player?
Messi,
But yeah,
Ronaldo,
Messi is one of my favorites. He's just spectacular. If you took him and you took him out of football and you placed him into, let's say, American football as a linebacker and expected him to block 400-pound humans that were running at him, he would not do a good job. And
No,
it doesn't mean that he's
exactly.
not a spectacular world-class athlete. It means that you put him in the wrong position and that you didn't design a system that worked for him. So I think that's what we have to keep in mind. And again, tying it back to, that's where design matters, and that's where flexibility matters.
Have you always been entrepreneurial, do you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When I was a kid, my cousins and I would design companies and sell shares of them to our family members. So yes, I would say I was pretty much born both for HR and for being entrepreneurial, because I also would play interview with my mother and HR with her. I even fired her once when I was 6.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. That must have been a tough dinner after that.
It was not. She was extremely proud.
Wonderful. All right, let's talk about your company, Titan Management. And can you tell me about the unique approach that you approach your business?
Yeah. So I take the actually very old principle of universal design, which is common in IT and architecture. And basically it means design globally, design for everyone, design with everything in mind. And that sounds like it's cumbersome and overwhelming, but it's not. It's actually extremely simple. And so I take that and I create universal workplace design and create a system in which everyone can function highly and everyone has the tools that they need to be the most efficient and productive versions of themselves, as well as the healthiest version of themselves. And then we just go from there, right? And that goes from policy to procedures to leadership and communication. We also, as part of that, part of the lesson is learning to turn off our primitive brain response, which is known as the ego mechanism that causes us to have poor communication skills, and learning to turn that off, move all of our responses into our conscious brain and respond in curiosity. And I actually teach leadership how to do that and how to better engage and communicate with their people. And it's been really cool to watch. And I've had people message me and go, that changed my life. Like, it saved my marriage. I had one client message me and say, this saved my marriage. Thank you. Like, learning how to actually communicate. Who knew that marriage needed good communication? But doing that, learning how to truly communicate, how to incorporate all the different learning styles and communication styles, and to do it simply. That's why we stand out. And then perpetual innovation. I love to research. I love to learn. And I don't believe in following standards. I believe in setting them. And I believe in setting the trends, not following them.
What do you mean by universal workplace?
Yeah, it's just taking that universal design concept and putting it in the workplace. That's all.
And inclusivity as well. You've talked about that a little bit, and I find it interesting. And you said right at the start that your inclusivity includes everyone.
Everyone,
which
literally everybody. Yeah.
No, but the interesting thing about inclusivity, and this might not go down very well, but the perception. So I worked in corporate for 14 years in companies, large companies, that inclusivity was an important factor because of lots of reasons, socially, politically, whatever. But when you're in those organizations and they're talking about inclusivity, they are talking about marginalized sections of society, whether it's from health or socioeconomic or race or gender or whatever. And the focus on that inclusivity is marginalized groups coming into, if I say the middle, into the company and being included. And sometimes as a boring white middle class male, you can actually feel quite marginalized from that inclusivity. And that's why I was wanting to delve a little bit deeper into that, and why you can explore that idea of inclusivity for everyone, whether you're white, black, pink, green, whatever gender, whatever. How do you incorporate that into your companies that you work with?
And I love that you brought that up, because it is a highly misunderstood concept. And quite often I've been asked before, why are DE&I efforts failing? And I have two answers for that. Number one is that no KPIs have been attached, and nobody's actually bothering to track and follow the actual things that will naturally happen and will naturally improve. And when you can't make a business case, things go away, right? So that's number one. Number two is that a lot of people have been placed in DE&I leadership that only have one specialty. So they only really care about inclusion for one group or two groups or three groups, right? And that's a problem. You can't lead a whole group if you're only focused on three, and you can't be truly inclusive if you're only focused on these groups. And I started realizing this when I spoke to a lot of DE&I folks who would get infuriated that people cared about inclusion for groups that were not their own. And I believe in the benefit of specialists. I believe in that. But if somebody is going to be leading a full inclusion program, they need to have broad spectrum thinking, and it needs to be based on everybody. And to me, it defeats the purpose of inclusion to include certain groups and then to automatically create other marginalized persons. That makes no sense. That just makes zero sense. And inclusion can only truly function when everyone is thought of and considered and honored. And to me, it's about freedom and respect as well too, which I hold very dear. So one of the first lessons I teach businesses is the difference between inclusion and infliction. I say, for instance, inclusion is that everyone should be allowed to practice their own religion as they so choose, as long as it does not disrupt the workflow. Right? So if you want to pray, great. Just make sure it's not doing something that disrupts anything or causes safety issues. Infliction is if you get everybody together and make them participate in one religious prayer. That's infliction. Right. So that's the difference. It's you get to be you and I get to be me. And we're all going to be respectful, and we're all going to be supported, not just allowed to, but supported in being ourselves and in being being healthy and all that. That's the difference. And that's part of universal design, is building in all of that. One of the policies that I use, and this isn't applicable for every business. There are businesses where this is not possible, so we do have alternate solutions. But in a lot of businesses, what I recommend is to move from set paid holidays. Most companies will have 7 or 8 set days that are paid. Well, maybe not everybody cares about those holidays, or they're not applicable to them because of their own religious or cultural background. Just give them a bank for holiday days and let them take them as they wish, and let them honor the things that matter to them. Turning accommodations into standard options, which benefits everybody, not just people with disabilities. It helps everyone. I don't know anyone who couldn't use an ergonomic mouse or screen protectors or different apps that help them stay on task. So it's about everybody, because if some people are stressed and unincluded, it will trickle out. And the problems will persist. It has to be all encompassing.
And there's a general feeling that people are... So I'm on the cusp of millennial and a Gen X. I was born in 1980. And there's people in their later 40s. And there's people, Piers Morgan, he's infiltrated into the US for a while. He's come back to the UK now. And he talks about the absurdity of people's gender decisions, and not the decisions they make, but just like the labeling and things like that. And I do think there is an element of that white middle class man, heterosexual man, which they feel they're being marginalized themselves, because why can't they label themselves as something absurd to make their point, which is not helpful in all manner of discussions. I totally understand that he's not helping the situation. He's fueling the fire on both sides. The people who feel marginalized feel that anyway, what my point I was trying to make is the inclusivity of that generation of people, like let's just say 45 plus, that now feel that they're being marginalized because of the inclusive policies and government decisions and legislation which are trying to protect people that are marginalized. There's a long-winded way of asking this question. I still want to just delve a little bit deeper into how do we get inclusivity for everyone, for the 50-year-old white heterosexual, for the person that decides that they want to be gender fluid, how do we get that? How do we get that in society and in businesses?
I think it's way more simple than people make it out to be. And I think that we need to address the actual problem, because what's happening is when people are feeling marginalized, it's because you're asking them to change something that they're doing. So this person has always used the term man or woman, and they don't want to use other terms because that means they have to learn a new behavior. So that's what that's really about. They're not saying that I don't get to be a man, or they're not saying, and typically, now there are other people who are saying, now wait a minute, this is my identity and I don't feel connected to you. So this feels weird to me. Like, why are you using the same term as me when you're something different or somebody different, or however you want to say it. And we need to look at that, because it's not right to say we can have our identity, but you don't get to have yours. We can change terminology, but you can't. That's super hypocritical, right? We want to make sure, I think we just need to, again, we need to come back to breaking the ego mechanism, responding in curiosity, and having active dialogue, because we will find the solutions. And just digging your heels in and saying, you don't get to evolve, but I do. You don't get to have a choice, but I do. I get to tell you what you will say and do, but you don't get to tell me. That doesn't work. And what's interesting is that some people, not whole groups, but some individuals are doing the same thing to others that they didn't want done to them. And that's so true. So it's all about conversation. And there's also a lot of assumption. There are a lot of people that assume, oh, this person said this because they don't support my identity or my disability or my race or my religion. And that may not actually be it. The person may just be curious. I cannot tell you how many times I've watched a person just genuinely trying to get some understanding, trying to get some information, just get shut down with aggression. And I'm going, whoa, this person just asked a question. Whoa, let's stop and breathe. So I think that there needs to be a lot more civility and a lot more conversation, a lot more discussion. And we do need to understand that we need to give a little bit of grace as things change and evolve, and letting people catch up. So if there's a willingness to change, so if you have a person who's, okay, I don't get it, but I'm really trying, okay, help them out, help them learn, help them, give them some grace. They might slip and say the wrong term. It happens with neurodiversity a lot. It happens with disability. It happens with gender identity. Give a little grace, as terminology is constantly changing. I even had to call a friend. So when the term non-binary first came out, I did not understand what people were saying to me. And at the time, there was nothing on Google. If you Googled it, there was just nothing helpful at all. Because this was very early on. And so I had to call a friend of mine and get some help. And she helped me understand. I was like, oh, okay, got it. On the same page. We're good. I support. Let's do this. So I think explaining terminology, that kind of thing, but just having the curious conversations. I gave a talk at one point to a group of professionals. And I told them, I said, don't worry, we're not going to actually dive into this topic, but I'm going to use it because I want to make a point. And I said, let's talk about I said, I'm going to use the example of transgender children and how to care for them. Everybody tensed up, right? Everybody's, oh my God, what is she doing? What's happening? Like, I was not mentally prepared for this. And I said, okay, So on the one side, quote, you have people who are concerned about a child feeling welcome, included, loved. They're worried about suicidality. They're worried about mental health, all of these things. Yeah, some people start nodding. I said, on the other side, you have people who are concerned, again, about mental health, about the child's physical well-being, about making sure that we're not sending them down a path that they're later going to change their mind about, these kinds of things. Some other people start nodding. I said, what I hear is that everybody here cares about kids. And the room just fell silent. I said, every single one of you has the same mission. You have the same goal. You just have a different idea of how to get there. I said, so the best thing you can do is have a curious conversation based on the mission alignment. And then we changed the topic. I gave them work-related topics that were really controversial and put people together, had different, positions, and we practiced it and it worked. But I think that's very much what's needed. We need to realize that a lot of times we're not really on opposite sides. A lot of times we're on the same side, but trying to move forward. But the other truth is, and this is just the truth, sometimes you're going to have a jerk and you have to fire them.
Yeah.
If you have somebody that it's not a misunderstanding, and you can always tell because they dig in. This is the person that digs in. That when you bring it up, there's no apology. There's no, I want to learn. They just dig in. They're just a jerk. Fire them. Because they're never going to get better. And so just fire the jerk. And that's, I have a whole talk around that. Like, fire the jerk. Sometimes you just have to. There are people who are hateful and you just have to get rid of them. If there's a misunderstanding, you can work on it. If they're hateful, they got to go.
Yeah. It's toxicity, isn't it? You get, and there's always, as you say, there's always a jerk in a company.
Oh yeah,
and
you just gotta do it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, not just
even
in
your
companies.
life, like fire people from your life. Be like, no.
Yeah.
Do not want.
So let me ask you about your client. So who do you typically work with? Who's your target client that you'd like to work with and do work with?
Typically small to growth stage companies. So as small as about 20 or so, right around the time they start really needing policies, procedures, HR, that kind of stuff. So from 20 all the way up to about the 500 to 600 mark is my sweet spot. But I have worked with large companies as well, especially on individual programs like neuro inclusion or innovating hiring, things like that. So I do larger companies, but my sweet spot is the growth stage guys.
Amazing. How do you one of the questions that came up in my mind, which I want to come back to, when you were talking about earlier on about happiness being part of, you should be bringing that into your business, and I agree. How do you manage the idea, and this is very prevalent in some sectors and some industries, that whole idea of that hustle? So you need to hustle to be able to achieve. You need to do the 16, 18-hour days to be able to achieve that, versus making sure that company employees are happy as well. Because some people want to achieve everything before they're 25 or 30 or whatever. And some people are just like, I want to enjoy my job. I want to enjoy my life. How do you, when you're talking to those companies that maybe have both sides to their company, how do you embed that to include, let's use the word, include the hustle mentality, but equally making sure that the employees are happy as well?
I think it's a matter of flexibility and giving people a choice to do what works for them. And some people will go back and forth between the two, by the way. So for me, for instance, there will be stages where I am like, let me work 20 hours a day and I'm a happy girl. That's what I want to do. I love my work. I could just eat. It's actually great that I have my husband, because if I didn't, all I would ever do is work. And I would just be that obsessed, crazy human being. So it's actually really good that I have him, and we foster animals and all that kind of stuff. But
amazing.
You have to balance and leave room for people to be where they're at, right? So number one, play to their strengths, right? So like we talked earlier about, so you wouldn't take Messi and you wouldn't put him in defense and tell him never to score a goal. That's idiotic. But you want him front, scoring the goals, doing his thing. And you wouldn't take a fantastic goaltender and put them out on the field and that type of thing. You play to their strengths. Part of that is symbiotic work cells is a great tool to ensure that people, I'm going to explain, don't worry, that people can have that fluidity, but all the same work gets done. So a symbiotic work cell is when you get several people who have essentially the same job, right? It doesn't have to be exact, but it's essentially the same job. And they come together to all get the same amount of work done, but they play to each other's strengths. For instance, I was once in a symbiotic work cell in which I took over a huge portion of somebody's tasks because they just were not good at doing the churn and getting things and staying organized, typing the emails the right way, that kind of thing. So I took a bunch of their tasks. This person took the calls because young Catherine did not have the same patience that Catherine does now. And I had customers, and when customers talked crazy to me for no reason, they just because they were having a bad day, it did not go well. So he took all of those clients for me so that I didn't have to deal with that and get stressed out and get in the wrong headspace and all of that. And we just worked. Now, we also still learn from each other, and we both grew as professionals, right? And we both, our strengths started leveling out and our weaknesses started leveling out as well. But we were all together. And then also when one of us was gone, the other people in the group can just pick up the work and keep going. It's not devastating. Right. So it's a really good way to just work with that. We all got to know each other's preferences. They got used to my cycles. I got used to theirs. And we all just fluidly work together. There's this weird concept in our business world that's pretty much global that I can find, where people think that somebody just needs to have a job and that's all they ever do and they're responsible for this one workload and that's just it. That's stupid. Again, like mission alignment, right? Is all of the work getting done? Great. So who cares how it gets done? We don't need one person to just do this thing. A group of people can come together and do it.
So let's explore the hiring process and the job description, which obviously is a massive part of hiring process. How do you revamp their hiring processes when you're working with your clients?
So first of all, again, back to the universal design, right? Let's make sure that this process is going to work for everybody. And let's make sure that there's nothing frustrating. I cannot tell you how many companies right now are doing things that just don't make sense. For instance, here in the United States, one thing that I'm seeing a lot is that what are the government mandated inclusion questions are being asked and alongside the company asking these questions. So you're answering the same questions like 3 times and it's redundant and it's frustrating and it's irritating. So you take that out. Asking interview questions in the application. Nope. Wrong stage of the job process, of the job hunt, okay? And the hiring process. Application is one thing, interview is another thing. Separating out those things. It can also cause a lot of frustration, anxiety, stress for a person to mix those 2 stages, moving those around, making sure that all the information the candidate needs is provided, that type of thing. So doing the basics, right? Going through and making sure that things make sense. But innovating hiring is more than just about the process at the time that it's needed. It's about everything that you do before that to set you up. So active employer branding, be out there podcasting, be out there on social, talking about your people, what's going on with them, having them post, showcasing your humans. I have one client that has a whole Instagram that's dedicated to their team and they constantly post and all kinds of people that aren't working for them follow it. They just love it. People just eat it up.
Amazing.
It's really cool. So active employer branding, actively gathering data, get on LinkedIn and see, okay, what are people wanting? What are people not wanting? Pay attention, make sure that you're following up. So preparing for the hiring process, making sure that leaders are properly trained on how to interview. It's so fascinating. People assume, oh, you're a manager, you know how to interview now. Why? Why would you know how to do that if nobody ever taught you? So training people on how to properly interview, having questions, again, considering different communication styles, right? Having questions that you can ask in different ways. So having different formats for each question to present so that however they communicate, however they learn best, you can set them up for success, how to structure the interview. And by the way, every interview should be started by answering and just giving all the information that you know the candidate wants. Because then they can decompress. They don't have to try to remember questions. They don't have to try to use brain power on things that are not what you're asking. So get all their stuff out of the way so they can actually focus on what you need. And it sets them up for success. So give them the salary, the benefits, the hours, all the stuff that people care about up front. And then just go through the whole thing. And it works so much better. And then so that's pretty much it. It's all about universal design. It's about restructuring. It's about prepping, active employer branding. And then it's about learning how the psychology behind interviewing and how to actually set people up, because we've always had this weird idea that people need to be good at interviewing, but we're not hiring them to be interviewed. We're hiring them to do a job. So we need to be good at interviewing so that it doesn't matter whether or not they are.
Yeah. And one of my bugbears, I've had a few jobs before I started running my businesses, and onboarding, once the clients once your employee has signed up, I've had a real mixed bag and I really believe that onboarding is you're setting that employee up for either having a good experience in your company or not. Can you give an example of a company that perhaps were poor at it on onboarding and how you were able to turn that around for them?
Oh yeah, I absolutely can. And just real quick to honor what you're saying, did you know that in over 80% of cases, if you give a poor onboarding experience, the candidate never stops looking for a job?
I can 100% believe
Yeah.
that. I'm not surprised
So
by that number.
this is
It's a
why-
huge number, but I'm not surprised at all by it.
This is why onboarding matters, folks.
Yeah.
And it may be like they may not be actively looking, but they always have it in their mind to keep looking. They've already checked out from you. So I went into one company that, oh, bless their little hearts. The equipment wouldn't be ready. The logins wouldn't be ready. The signed into payroll would not have happened. They would have to be begging for hiring documents like a week or two after because they didn't bother to collect the hire documents ahead of time. Right. It was just bad. And whoever was training, it was just, you were just thrown with somebody who was not expecting it, or they had just been told that morning that they'd be training somebody. There was no real organization to it. It was bad. Yeah. And this was a job that required training. You weren't going to, they had an unusual product and you were just going to have to learn it on the fly. First thing we did is that we started collecting the hire documents ahead of time. We sent a questionnaire about how do you best learn? How are you best communicated with? And are there any needs that you would like? Is there anything we can get you before you start, including the list of standard accommodations? So if there's a lot of standing, do you want a standing stool? Do you want a pad that will be at your workstation? If so, what's the best material for you? These types of things. So let's make you comfortable, which made people feel so welcome, by the way. They love that. They're like, oh, yeah, you really care. Thank you. Like, oh my gosh, like you actually want me to do well with this. We asked about noise canceling headphones because it was a loud environment. So we started doing all that, getting things prepped. We had day before, and then there were different stages. So we started doing that a few days to a week, depending on how quickly they were starting. A few days to a week before they started. That's what we sent out. We made sure we get it all back. There were reminders to follow up. Then the day before, we followed up with them, did one last kind of check-in, reminded them of how to access the building, who to ask for, what to wear, all these kinds of things. Because it did matter. Again, it was a production environment, so what you wore did matter for safety reasons. Then on the day before, we made sure that they were in the payroll system. They were already ready to go. And their logins were created, everything before they started. And then the day that they started, there was a printout of here are your logins for payroll. Here are your logins. Yeah. Here's how you do the things, written instructions with pictures, because some people are very visual, with pictures of things. Here's the things. They also got the employee handbook, which had all the policies, and they were given time to sit down and read it and ask questions and to say, hey, I don't quite understand this. What does this mean? That type of thing. So we went through the whole thing, and then we even added things like additional. The training, by the way, the trainer was assigned the second that they were hired. It was here you go, and there was an introduction to the trainer as part of the intro too. This is your trainer. This is who you'll be meeting. This is their background with us. Why we picked them. Yada yada. And we had feedback from the trainers. We did check-in follow-ups from the HR perspective and from leadership perspective. Gave them avenues to give us feedback. And then it was really funny because one of the things that started happening is people got so excited about this process that had already started working there that they wanted to experience part of it too. They were like, I want to be trained on this. So can I go through some of this? Can I do this? Can I like pick my own equipment? Because I didn't get to. I just got stuck with what was already here. And people got really excited, and people started being better prepared. And they started feeling more welcome. And then employees started recommending people to the job.
I was going to say, what was the retention? I'm assuming the retention rate was good at that company.
Yes, it skyrocketed. Their retention almost doubled. And then the employee recommendations, there hadn't been any at all. And then they started steadily getting a few a month. So it was really incredible.
Wonderful. It's so great to hear, because it's one of the things that has been painful for me at certain companies is that it's just not. It's a secondary thought and it's not important enough. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. Moving on, what would you say your risk appetite is now versus perhaps when you were younger?
I would have thought it would deteriorate, but it's not.
It's not.
I'm still like, let's just go for it. Why not? This will be fine. Just way too much confidence. I think that's the neurodiversity, but just way too much confidence.
And how was that? How has that helped and hindered your business life?
It's really helped because it's given me some of the best opportunities in my career. And and when you're that confident, you instill that into other people, right? Which is really great. It's hindered because some people aren't ready to move that fast. And so it could create friction. If you're working on a team of people, it can create some friction because they're like, wait, we're not ready for that. Well, pump the brakes. And so you have to master the skill of collaborating with the team, making sure everybody's on the same page, which now I have done. But earlier in my career, it was a stress point. Now it's just something that we sit down, we talk, we work through things, and I don't just start doing the thing before talking to the team.
And with your neurodiversity, how have you evolved as a leader and working in teams and working with the top areas of your business?
So executive function came really naturally to me. Executive work just made sense. Designing the things, the global type work, handling all of that, employee relations came natural to me. In terms of fixing the problems and investigations and all of that. What was not natural at all and took a lot of work was one-on-one management and dealing with direct reports, because I was like, why are you bothering me? I'm busy. or it would be like, oh my God, like, why are we doing this again? Or it did not feel natural to mother something that much. In my mind, I was like, well, you're an adult, go figure it out. Go, because I'm a naturally investigative person. If something's not right, I'm going to find the solution. And if I can't find it, then I'll come to you. But a lot of other people aren't like that. And it's not that they're lesser or broken or whatever. They're
different skill set.
Yeah. And a lot of people want to make sure they're in alignment ahead of time, all that kind of thing, which is actually very smart. So I had to learn how to work with people that function very differently, how to not let that interrupt my day or defunct my day. And that was challenging. It was challenging. And I ended up, I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like, you absolutely need to be fired, to 10, like you're the best manager ever. I would say that now I'm at a solid 8. I'm at a solid 8 for one-on-one management. Executive function 10, one-on-one management 8, because I've learned to even enjoy it some. And especially the mentorship aspect and all with that part, I absolutely love. Yeah. So I'd say I'm a very solid 8 now. And it's still growing.
That's brilliant. That's amazing. Look, we're coming to the end of the interview. I've asked the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. First question. What's the best decision that you've made?
To go into business for myself. That was it. Like just the initial, you know what, I could do this better, and just doing it is great. And then the other one I would say is getting the neuroscience certifications and doing all that research, because it taught me how people think, how people function on a very basic level. And it's really helped me in every aspect of my business and my personal life to better interact, to be more effective, to be more understanding of what's going on, because now I can actually understand what's happening in front of me instead of being confused by it. I actually have the information that I need.
Amazing. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
So I was once told by a wonderful human who is still to this day a mentor of mine. She's a woman in business before there were a lot of women in business. Okay. And she's gorgeous, beautiful woman, which is relevant to this. And I kept having people underestimate me and all that, and that just really didn't, in the business world, that just would treat me like I just didn't know what I was talking about or anything. And In several cases, it was because those people had other ideas about what our relationship could be, and it was an issue. And so, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, and actually this still to this day helps me with negotiation, is she looked at me, she was listening to everything I was saying to her, and she said, let them think you're stupid. And then take everything. And I've done it. And I love it. She's like, let them think you're stupid. Who cares? And she goes, then you can do whatever you want and they'll never see it coming. And it's not about being unethical. It's not about taking from somebody what's theirs. It's about taking what's yours and doing the things that you need to grow and develop. And who cares if they think you're stupid? Why does that matter? Why does their opinion matter? Just do what you want to do and be successful and show them.
That's amazing. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
Actually, both of my parents for different reasons, especially mom because she's in the HR field. So that was obviously very helpful. Marcine, the lady I just mentioned, and then actually my husband. He's, especially with that growth I talked about being a direct supervisor, that's his jam. He's a straight 10 and just took to it naturally. Just that was his thing. And he's also a phenomenal educator and teaching me how to do that and work through that. And then he's also a great sounding board and thinks differently than I do. So he has autism, by the way, and we bounce things off of each other and learn a lot. And so actually he's made an astronomical difference in my career. And I'm very grateful for that.
Amazing. Tell me about a regret that you have.
I would say one of my biggest regrets was I had an employee. I was going through such a rough time in my life. And I was building out this astronomical project. It was one of the last W-2 jobs that I had. And it was really cool. It was a great project. We were building out a whole nationwide department and it was really fascinating. And I had one team member who was helping out. He was really great at his job, and I could just tell something was wrong. I was like, something's not right. It's defunct. And I didn't give it enough attention. And I didn't give him as much as I could have. I wasn't a bad manager to him. I wasn't a bad leader, but I just didn't give as much as I could have. And because of that, there ended up being an explosion on his end and a big problem, and he had to be terminated. And I've always regretted not taking the time. And so ever since then, I do. That was one of the biggest lessons in my career. Taking that time, that somebody's struggling, when you see that somebody's having a hard time, taking that time to spend with them and get nosy. You don't need to know every detail, but just how can I support you while you're at work? What can I do?
Great life lesson. Great life lesson. Next question. What are you most proud of?
Getting to speak to United Nations delegates about neurodiversity.
Amazing.
In London.
How did that come about?
They actually found me. I had been speaking and teaching on the topic for a while. This group that was putting the event together found me and invited me, and I went, and it was an unbelievable experience. It was absolutely remarkable.
Amazing. Why do you do what you do?
I love that it's always different. And I love helping businesses grow. I always have. I've always worked around, not always, but most of my career has been spent around growth stage and startup. Companies. I've taken an organization from 2 people to 60, or from 12 people to over 200. And watching that happen, it's just extraordinary, especially with organizations that are really making a difference out there. But helping all that grow. And then on the neurodiversity side, I do it because I think everybody should have had the experience I did growing up, and they didn't. And I want to make the world better so that everybody can.
Amazing. What does legacy mean to you?
Legacy to me is the long-lasting effect of your life. Like, even after you're gone, what is it that you leave behind? What great thing have you imparted upon the world? And for me, I'm hoping that it's going to be universal design across society and across the workplace, and teaching people how to better communicate with one another so that we can have true inclusion.
Amazing. And lastly, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm all over LinkedIn, just all over the place. Come find me. I will message you back. I'll talk to you about anything, personal, professional, doesn't matter. Reach out. KMcCordSpeaking.com or TitanManagementUSA.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Katherine.
Oh,
It's
wait,
been
real quick. I'm
such
so
an...
sorry. I nearly forgot.
Yes.
I just wrote a book and I just published it, and it's about universal design. It's on
What's it
Amazon.
called?
It's on Amazon. It is called The Obvious Solution You've Never Heard of. Universal Workplace Design. That's it. It's on
Amazing.
Amazon.
So glad you got that in before I closed
I
off.
totally
Look, thank you
forgot.
so much for your time. It's been a real eye-opener. Thank you for answering my kind of like personal questions as well as my sort of planned business questions. It's been really inspiring to hear your story and your journey that you've been on. And thank you for your honesty on the show. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Business Growth Talks. This podcast is released every Monday, so don't miss an episode by subscribing to all podcast platforms, including Apple and Spotify. Have a great day.